Wilson on the podcast, who came on the podcast, I think episode 10 in March 2018, and had some great feedback from the listeners, and really enjoyed some of the stories that he told, particularly that one about John Demartini and just that evolution of that relationship. Just love the insights and the stories. I think everyone enjoys a good story, and you're obviously a good storyteller. So I wanted to reach out and get you back on. So welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, thanks, Adam. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to hopefully telling a few more stories.
Yes, definitely. So I think last time we spoke, I'm not sure, but just from social media, I don't think there was you had a special lady in your life. Well, now you do, and I think it's probably a bit of an awkward start to the conversation. But
No.
I remember like you were very regimented in your routine last time. You were getting up at 4:30 a.m. 6 days a week. You're writing. You're focused. You're doing lots of things. But I just wondered how that has changed since you've now got a girlfriend. Has that changed at all?
That is such a great question, because a lot of interviewers wouldn't go there, but I'm glad you asked it, because there was definitely a point in my life, and I've really only probably super recently actually worked through it and done the work on it. But there's definitely a point in my life where I just did not think it would be possible to have a growing business and a girlfriend at the same time. And that was like a big thing, because originally one of my hang-ups was I had a girlfriend and I worked really hard, and that kind of exposed the relationship for what it was. And therefore I had started getting these negative associations with, if I grow my business to a certain, I can grow it to a certain point, but once it gets there, then, things are going to start to hit the rocks and it's all going to fall down. But what I had to work through was discovering that you can definitely have, as I'm living proof and you're living proof too, Adam, that you can definitely have a relationship and a business. It's more about finding a person that's most compatible and someone who's aligned with your values. So my partner, Liz, she's just incredible as far as, pushing me and growing and supporting and challenging. And really it's about, for me anyway, anyone that might have been in that position, is just looking at what they want to achieve, staying true to their values. And I had a really interesting experience. So we're talking about Dr. John Demartini. I remember actually one time I reached out and asked him, because I'm looking to empower all areas of my life, and relationships being one of those. And he was saying that, you attract people into your life to try and help you empower parts of your life. And so if you imagine like a life wheel, and relationship, if you imagine like a piece, like a whole pizza, and there's different slices, and if your relationship, and for me at one point in time it was low, but I wanted to empower it. And John was saying, you attract people to fulfill the missing part. But I said to him, I want to have the self-reliance and empower all areas of my life by myself. I don't want to rely on anyone else. And I said, so how do I have a relationship though? Because if I'm empowering myself, how's that work? And he basically said, what you want is you want to have a relationship that runs in parallel. So it's parallel journeys of expansion as individuals. And it just so happens to be that you're compatible at this very point in time. And, for the time being, and definitely for the foreseeable future, I can't imagine anyone else being in my life. And it feels really great to be able to have and find someone that does push me and challenge me, and someone that I can push and challenge, and someone who's open to growing. And, so if you asked me 2 years ago, is it possible? I would have said no way. Next question. But now I definitely see it I think it's great. And I think it's just about, like you know, Adam, just finding the right person that wants to be part of that and accepts you for who you are. And I guess, it's also that secondary part where you accept who you are and you're okay with that. I'm completely okay. For as long as I'm serving inside of Liz's life, then I'll be in it. And as long as she's serving in my life, then she'll be in it. Yeah. But if that was no longer the case, I wouldn't want either of us to maintain a life of pain for the sake of it. It wouldn't make much sense. So
Yeah,
it's happy times.
Yeah, and part of the reason was because I was probably maybe 5-6 years ago, I was in the same sort of situation, working lots, very focused, had very detailed routines, and I couldn't actually imagine actually stepping into that and giving up your time. But then you start to see what the relationship can do to the other areas of your life as well. And obviously, obviously, if you're on the same path, and what Demartini says, if you've got, essentially the same end goals, you're both aligned in terms of, self-development or whatever it is that you're interested in, I think it can sort of empower other areas and inspire you to uphold yourself to certain levels as well.
Well, second funny story that I had a part of that, because I was very regimented. I didn't really want to travel. I just wanted to stay and focus on my business. And then, funnily enough, I traveled to, at the time I was in Melbourne, and then I said, I'm going to go up to Queensland where my girlfriend lives. And now I live too. And it was basically, you go up there. And I got a client. And then I was like, this travel stuff's not too bad. And then like a month later, I traveled to Perth and got another client. And then like a month after that, I traveled to Sydney and got another client. So what I thought was, and Liz was in these different situations and different locations. And so I was like, this travel thing is actually not too bad. So it goes to show, sometimes getting out of your comfort zone and out of like that routine is the best thing for you. So it's pretty grateful for that too. She's cool.
Yeah. And then you can also get that external feedback because you have someone directly there. I use Olivia as my sounding board if I'm writing an article or something. I'll always ask her what she thinks, and it's good to get that sort of subjective view, because a lot of times, you ask your friends or someone like that, they might give you a sugar-coated answer, but I think definitely with my relationship, just tell me how it is and tell me you need to work harder or something like that, which is always a good thing. So since 18 months ago we chatted, what I guess is the focus now? Have there been any sort of big revelations with your, I guess, personal development, but also aligned to your business as well? Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things that I've really stepped into is doing the work. So I at one point in time, definitely, I love reading, I love growing, I love, ingesting different material, writing about it, learning about it, sharing it, etc. And one of the biggest things that I realized was, and this goes back further than 18 months, but the last 18 months, definitely really stepping into it, has been the difference between learning and self-development. So I would previously believe that if I was reading a book, then I was developing myself. But what I've discovered is two things. One is often we can fall into what I would call confirmation learning, where you're not really learning or pushing your boundaries or trying to find anything that's counter to what you might have read or learned about before. You're almost looking and seeking out things that confirm. I think it's called the confirmation bias. I'm not a scientist, but I think something around that. I was looking for...
That's right.
I was looking for things, that were, confirming what I already knew, which isn't really, it wasn't giving me a fully rounded view of an objective view of a reality. And so I started to ask myself questions and question the knowledge that I may have been receiving. And one really important question that the listener can ask him or herself is, how do you know? And I love that question because it really exposes whether you've learnt something from a book, whether you've learnt it from experience, and both are valid forms of learning. But, how do you know? How do you know it's that way? Is I found that a really beneficial. The second part of that journey is, you've got the learning side of things and the reading and the ingesting, but then there's the actual self-development and doing the work. And that's when you're really, I'm working with a coach now, and the thing I was saying to her the other week, probably 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I was like, the thing that I love most about when we connect and we have our calls is you shatter my previous beliefs and my, expectations and paradigm of how I live. And, it sucks. It sucks so much that, you've got these beliefs and that's your truth, right? And then someone shows you almost you've got the front of a house and this is how it is. This is how, and you might even see the sides and your peripherals or whatever. And it's yep, this is the beautiful house. And then someone shows you, hey, come over here, and you walk around the side of the house and then around the back. And it's like, you didn't have a fully complete view. And they're like, check this out. Like, you're missing a whole bunch of bricks. You've got no windows at the back. There's no drainage. Like, it's a shit heap back there. And like that, like, wake up call is just like, it sucks so much because you're just like, like everything I've been taught is just like destroyed. But I wrote about this in my book, Why Wait to Be Great. It's like almost like peering over the wall of greatness and seeing like your potential on the other side. Like, once you look over, you can't, if you want to live a truly congruent life, which I do, and which you do as well, Adam, like, if you look over and see what's on the other side and know that's the truth, and then you crawl back, like, you can't. Once you live and once you commit to like living an authentic life, you can't look over the edge and not decide to pursue it. Like, that's over the other side is your potential, and if you're prepared to go through the work, then that's, heading towards your greatness. And unless you're willing to go there and be courageous and accept defeat, and well, not even defeat, but accept the hard times, accept the good times, not place judgments around them. So really, the last 18 months has been a huge focus on doing the work. And as a part of that, I've just like, the more that I do that, the more assistance I can be for others, because I'm no longer carrying around all this baggage. And the more that I just think, like, the more that you work internally, the more that you're then able to have a bigger ripple effect and help people in all different areas of their lives. I've healed a relationship with my father, who passed away when I was 8 years old. I've been able to take instances of bullying and instances of manhood and not feeling good enough and all these like feelings of self-loathing and lack of self-love and all this like stuff that usually, if we're completely honest, I mean, if there's a lot of guys listening, all that stuff's generally sort of almost hidden or reserved for the girls or for the ladies, and it's sort of not many people are talking about, self-love protocols for men, or even opening up that conversation. I mean, it's starting to, which is really awesome. But really looking at things like, the role of a male in society is X, like providing and protecting, they've got to make the money and all these like conceptions around who we are. And really, I think over the last 18 months, it's been more of a challenging of these societal belief systems. Like, why is it so? How do you know? And questioning myself and others, as opposed to just listening, reading. And I used to read a book and I would just take it on as gospel. I'd be like, oh, well, this person said it, and that must be the truth. And then now it's more like, well, is that really the truth? And so that's been probably like the theme of the last 18 months, is really just going deep inside of myself to create a ripple effect to then help other people who are asking questions, who are ready for a greater level of truth, who are excited and inspired about maybe seeing a different possibility for themselves, and lastly, prepared to do the work to do that. Because as you would know, like, it's not easy, it's not exciting, and it's not fun all the time, but it is worth it.
But I think what you touched on with that analogy with peering over and looking at the back of the house and you see the bricks that are missing, it can be quite painful, to point out your weakness. And you got to, and I think you used the word before, courageous. You got to have some sort of, strength to look at something that you perhaps might have avoided. And you can always use the analogy that I use as well as with, strength training. You're a lot of times, your weak links are going to be holding you back in whether it's a deadlift, whether it's a squat or whatever it is. If you don't take care of that pathology or that weakness in that area, that is going to become a gaping hole in your development as as a strength athlete, but also quick. And so when you work with someone like that, how do you get to that? I guess to be vulnerable and to be a man, it's sometimes it's frowned upon, or just from society it's not, you don't talk about your feelings. How did you get yourself to that space to work with someone like that and to have them tug at your insecurities, and to be willing to work on it, because I know not everyone, it's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, that's also a great question, and the answer is you just get sick of the shit. You get sick of running the same cycle, and that is like thinking you're ahead, and it's just like this false doorway. And what actually ends up happening is you walk through a door and you think, oh, I'm doing the work, right? And then you walk through it. And it's almost like when you go to the festivals or the carnival and the circus, and then you walk through a door, and then you just keep walking, and then all of a sudden you don't realize it, but you're back at the same door. You just will do a bit of a loop, and I was just doing the same work over and over again, and I'm like, hey, this kind of looks familiar, but the pain wasn't enough. The pain, I was like some kind of sick masochist where I enjoyed the suffering. I enjoyed the victimhood of staying stuck. And I am someone who likes growing, but there's degrees of this shit. There's levels of how willing you are to grow. And so even if someone's listening and think, oh no, that's not me, there's definitely areas, because if you ever get to that point, then you're telling yourself the biggest lie there is. Everything's complete now. This is never the reality. There's always new levels, and I really wanted to explore how deep that could go. And I also wanted to recognize how if these are the things that keep popping up. So I'll give you an example. I would often ask myself, I was often seeking the approval of my dad. And that could never happen because he passed away 25 plus years ago. And so I was always would he be proud of me, and sort of hoping and wishing and waiting for his approval. And when things would get really hard, I would be I'd be like, oh, I wish my dad was around. It'd be so much easier, victim. And then when things were fine, it sort of wouldn't show up. And so sort of working with coaches and working on myself, I started to recognize and realize, I'm like, that's kind of interesting. And what I discovered was the only time I was seeking his approval was when I was off track. And so the best thing about understanding that at that level is the only time I was seeking his approval was when I was unsure of myself. And the only time I was unsure of myself was when I wasn't following my values. And so I stopped. And now every time that my dad shows up, and in this case, it's a representation of my dad, but anytime that self-doubt, anytime that would dad be proud of me? It's just a little hint, and in varying degrees. It's just switch back over this way, or do a 90-degree turn, or whatever it might be, depending on the difficulty of the challenge. But it really is everything. If you're open and willing to learn from it, everything is a lesson. And so I just got sick of running the same cycle where for 3 months it'd be fine, and then 3 months later, my dad would show up in my life. Would he be proud of me? And then 3 months would be fine, and then he'd show up again. And I was just like, I can't keep doing this. It's just frustrating. It's taking its toll. I don't want to have these moments of motivation and then CBF, and then or just hitting the same wall, or hitting the same financial status. I want to grow. I want to expand. I want to be great in all areas of my life, and live as fully as I can as Hayden Wilson. And I just knew these things there's certain things that were holding me back, and I needed someone who, I desired to have someone who could dismantle a lot of the belief system, because a lot of people will talk about depression, and what happens is depression is partly, and I'm not a doctor, so don't fully, but this is just my opinion, but depression means that you're missing a certain chemicals, right? And from memory, I believe it's serotonin and oxytocin, these happy drugs that pop up in your mind. And they're like, people with depression have low levels, so then the medication they take raises these levels. Those levels are determined and dependent on the story that you tell yourself, and the story that you tell yourself is dependent on your values and your belief systems. And so if you're telling yourself that you're moving towards something that's important to you, and you've got purpose, and you're doing things that are aligned with your values, these things don't show up. So if we're able to change the behaviors, and we're able to change the actions that you're taking, and we're able to alter the perceptions of how you see something, no longer do you see something because depression is a living towards a fantasy. It's comparing your life how it is to how you wished it would be. And so when there's the bigger the gap, the more elevated the depression. And so if you've got depression, and this is like super bold, but if you've got depression, you're living in a fantasy. Like, you're trying to achieve something that's just not possible. Of course, there are levels of perhaps clinical depression, but if anyone's experiencing it, like, I challenge you, like, either take heed on my advice or reach out, or whatever you have to do. Like, look up Dr. John Demartini, contact myself. Like, there's new ways, new technologies on how to deal with some of the stuff. And if you're open to it, they can dramatically change your life. But I've just known from my own life that the whole paradigm of, depression and letting it like have its grip on your neck, like, it doesn't have to be that way. And, if anyone's listening that is in that situation, like, just also realize it definitely does not have to be that way. And you can definitely, like, just get real. Like, that was the first step, always just getting real. It's like, I don't want to live this way. I don't want to be scared of X. I don't want to forever, live in this fantasy.
Yeah.
And just coming to that realization is incredible.
Yeah. And without being prescriptive, but just, guess using, like, anecdotally what worked for you in terms of stepping away from, that validation or looking from validation for your dad. I mean, you don't have to get into full nitty gritty, but just in terms of, like, what overarching principles. Obviously, there needs to be a level of self-awareness, and you're working with a coach. The coach brings that up and says, Hayden, this is your issue here. And then obviously you become aware of that. That's the first step in I guess, realizing that you need to change something. But what's something that's, especially a behavior pattern that's been, I guess, self-serving for a long period of time, it's sort of ingrained in your sort of neural network. You reinforce it by constant behavior over time. How do you, I guess, change that behavior? And I guess this is more of a broad question as well, as if you're working with a client, but also just behavior change in general.
Yeah. So we only ever act if we see more positive than negative, or more upside than downside. And so the reason that a lot of people get stuck, and that I was getting stuck, is consciously and subconsciously and unconsciously, I was receiving more benefit from staying stuck in my story than getting real and having to face the reality and assuming and taking responsibility. And so a really good first step is just awareness and getting honest with yourself. So awareness and just realizing this is something that keeps popping up in your life is always at the first step. It's like, Then it's like getting curious and being like, that is actually interesting. And then it's getting honest and being like, actually, I don't want it to be this way anymore. What are some things? And just starting to ask some really good questions. What can I do from here? How would I like it to be? What is stopping me from getting there? What can I do every single day to help start to move me towards that? What would it look like fixed? Like, just asking some of these, like, introspective type questions is an amazing way to start to explore what might be going on in the mind. Because once you can change the story and change the links in your mind from, if I do this, then I'm going to get that. Because the situation we're describing, I would do this and I would get that. So I would potentially get sympathy, or I would, it would allow me to have, keep my business to a certain level, so I wouldn't then have to expand and grow and then get ridiculed if people weren't happy with my service, and just all those, like, riddles and, like, entangled BS that was just, like, part of my story. And I'm like, you know what? I don't think I want it to be that way anymore. And I want to have greater things. And I desired, my desire for change was in infinitely growing larger than the being stuck. And so I was like, you know what? Like, the hope of changing my reality was much greater than the pain of being stuck. Because I was like, you know what? I'm sick. I was sick of being stuck, and I was sick of, all the pain of doing the work. And so I was like, you know what? Awareness, getting honest with yourself, deciding, okay, well, now I know what I don't want it to look like. What would I desire it to look like? Then doing the freaking work, which is difficult in this context because there's a lot of different things that might be going on. But you know, as an example, you know, looking at, okay, how would it be different? What would I get out of that? And then just stacking benefit after benefit after benefit after benefit of what that could look like. And then doing what I call like a review and reassessment process where you're like, okay, is my behavior starting to change? Because I think there's like this illusion, right? I call it the illusion of transformation. And like with this picture painted, I guess, online through the many different success coaches and weekend transformation programs and X-day retreats and all that kind of stuff. And they're all really good, but they're a starting point. They're a really good way to awaken you. But if anyone thinks they're going to change their entire life over one weekend and just like completely turn their entire life around in one thing, like, it's a great starting point and you can really shift the way you see the world, but there's a progression to it, and there's an ongoing process of having to stick to it, and you know, the more embedded the beliefs, the bigger the turnaround. It's almost like when you pull a bow back, the further you can pull it back, the further the arrow is going to fly. But I think there's an illusion that, you know, that transformation is just like overnight. Like, you know, you go to a transformation or you hire a coach or whatever, and within 4 weeks, like your entire life is different, or all the weight just falls off. Like 4 weeks, you can have a 6-pack. But in reality, like, transformation's messy. If you look at it as a whole, like over the course of say 12 weeks or 12 months, like that's when the greatest change happens. Because like, wow, like something actually, like this is profoundly different. Like 12 weeks from when I looked a certain way to 12 weeks now, like if you could help your clients see that, or if you look at it for your own life, it's like, wow, like that was incredible. But yeah, the illusion of just like a really quick transformation is, you know, it doesn't really serve anyone. So I just much prefer to look at a greater, just look at the data over a greater data set.
Yeah, well, I think Craig Harper, who I think you've interviewed before, and I've heard him talk a lot. He's always like, 6-week transformation, 12-week transformation. He's like, man, join my 5-decade transformation. It's like, it's the daily practice, and it's he has a lot more F-bombs in when he delivers that, but very, very, very dry delivery, very funny, but just the way he posted that, and it coincides with what your point was as well. It's like, you know, you can't change your life in one weekend, but it's the daily habits, the doing the work, it's the routines, which you're obviously big on. What I guess that probably leads into another area is routines. I know last time we spoke, you're very regimented in specific routines, but has there been any revelations or changes that you do for your daily practice? I know you did a lot of journaling previously. Do you still do that?
Yeah, I definitely journal. I guess I'm more fluid with how I like to live my life at the moment. And I think everyone goes through different stages of, you know, I've definitely had times where it was like when I was writing my book, 3:50 a.m. wake up, like every morning, 6 days a week. And then on the 7th morning, it was, you know, a couple of hours later. And 3:50 a.m., do that, right, take the dog for a walk, then have breakfast, then start work. And it was very much like in a line. Now it's actually a little bit different, and I find it's actually quite refreshing to almost turn off that voice, that self-criticizing voice. I think a lot of like I'm totally against all this like hustle culture and you know, you should never take a day off, and you know, if you're not hustling and grinding every second of the day, you're fucking not working hard enough. I found that really counterproductive. I found that was like, you know, certainly like a level of ambition, and for some people, like that's what they need. They need like a nice wake up call. But if that's the fuel you're putting into your mind every single day, like I've just found there's more productive ways to inspire myself rather than beat myself up that I'm not working hard enough or I need to, you know, do 30-hour days and stuff like that. Like I stopped counting how many hours I worked, you know, long ago, because that was just a stupid ego number. And so as far as like habits, routines, rituals, etc., I've been enjoying. I usually wake up between, not so much 5 anymore. I used to be like religious 5 o'clock, but between 6 and 7, I'll normally wake up. And then I'll go and I'll like have a coffee. I make a coffee here at home, and I'll probably do some journaling or start some reading or something like that. And then between 7 and 10, this is the time I've negotiated with with my girlfriend, and we'll take our dog for a walk, and we'll get a coffee, and we'll take him to the park, and sort of just relax and chill. And then usually my work day starts about 10. And then it's a process of, whatever's most important for the week and, getting some work out, whether it's, coming on an interview like this, or whether it's, working on some content, whether it's writing, whether it's building a funnel or building a sales process, working on like deeper, like content for my program, coaching people, just a mixture of different things. And then, so my week, to answer the question, is a lot less regimented than what I've previously had. I'm actually enjoying it because you can move things around. And for right now, it's I'm still being able to get a lot done, but also not having that constant voice in my head being like, oh, you're not working hard enough. And, to have that removed as it sounds counterintuitive, but it helps you get more done or more of the right stuff done, because you're not constantly like, oh, you need to do more. It's like, well, do I? And really, even just like questioning that, like I was saying before, like questioning everything, like, well, do I, or is it just doing more of the smarter things, or do I really need to be doing that right now? Like, what's urgent, what's important, and just working on the stuff and figuring out like what a balanced and what a enjoyable and fulfilling life for me looks like. And for right now, that's a bit more laissez-faire in my self-governing system. And you know what? I do a review at the end of the day. I do my journaling. Like, there's certain non-negotiables, like journaling, my gratitude, working with a client, marketing, exercise, and, health, eating towards my goals and nutrition. There's certain, and a bit of self-work. There's a series of about 10 different things that basically every day, I complete as many of them as possible. And so I score myself. But as a whole, they're the main things I want to try and get done every single day, because I know that's just when I'm at my best, that's what I'm able to do. And then there's a splattering of other stuff that comes in and out as required, depending on what the goals are. So I'm more flexible now in the actual doing of it. But the deeper reasons and the whys and the motivation behind it is just as strong as ever. And I just found it's a more productive way for me to operate.
Yeah, and I think giving yourself that little bit of a leeway gives you a bit more creativity as well for ideas to come to you if you're constantly like, it's 5 a.m. I'm doing this, it's 6 a.m. I'm doing this, it's, every minute of the day. Whereas if you have, that little bit of chaos in your life, that adds that bit of elements that you weren't used to, and it gives you a different thought on whether it's a blog post or a podcast or whatever it is. I know that works for myself when I step away and I have that sort of perspective looking back at what I'm doing, rather than just constantly being in there, like you said before, just working, equating, working time for money. You're trying to, grind out the hours, get, be more successful, but sometimes stepping back gives you actually that perspective on what it is. Now, in the last interview, you said the phrase, you said the right coach seems to sort of show up for you at the right time, and obviously you're someone who's open to doing the work and to put your hand up and say, okay, this is where I need to improve. How do you go about, I guess, seeking those mentors? And I think last time you said you've had a number of paid, unpaid ones. Some of the unpaid ones were just as beneficial for you, but in say the last 18 months, what have you changed and started working with someone new, and has someone, I guess, shown up and given you the next steps for Hayden Wilson?
Yeah, I've got a really good answer to this. I was constantly searching for answers from someone else, and how this relates into it is with everyone having their own set of unique values, which is dictating them to a certain end point. That is something that, whether, depending on your belief system, whether that's a predetermined end point and you're sort of just revealing it to yourself along the way, or whether you're consciously or unconsciously creating different pathways along that. But either way, there's a certain end point that most people are trying to achieve, and that's whatever's highest on their values. And they're trying to figure out, okay, what's the easiest and best and most efficient route possible to get to there. And what happens was I was constantly in this, every time I'd be confused, I would try and ask other people what they think I should do. What should I do? What do you think I should do? And I was seeking answers from everyone else on the outside, being like, what do you think I should do? And it was funny because I started getting some really bizarre answers. And, that sounds like a lot of work. You should start an e-commerce store, partner up with someone who can do X and start an e-commerce store. And I was like, but that doesn't even take into account any of my likes or history or dislikes or the type of work that I want to do. And it kind of just hit me. And I was like, well, that's not really serving me if I'm keeping on asking all these external sources. And so then I wanted to really find someone who could draw out my inner wisdom. Like that was a master of asking really good questions. And that's definitely an area that I'm very passionate about, asking the right kinds of questions. And it's a skill. And I think that, sometimes though, just because you have it doesn't mean you know which questions to ask yourself. So I like having that external stimulus. So I started to ask myself some questions. If it's not just taking blind advice from people, and it's not just purely listening to the questions I'm asking myself, because I can only see one side of the house, as we mentioned before. It's good to get someone else who's experienced in asking questions, who I trust, who I know believes in the same or similar methodologies as me, and get them to start asking me certain questions. And so I found definitely like the most beneficial is not someone who feeds you answers. This is in the coaching and consulting realm. Like not someone who feeds you answers, not someone who says this is how you do it. At times, of course, like that's what you're seeking. You're seeking a path and a system and a methodology of how to do X or how to do X to get Y, and that can be helpful. But I found for my life what was the most beneficial was finding someone who could help draw out my inner wisdom, because that way. Because the problem was, even if other people had good intentions, they didn't know me. They couldn't have known me well enough unless they'd known me for like 10 years. Even then, at an unconscious level, the advice they're giving is based upon what's highest on their values. The person I asked, and let's just use the e-commerce store, that was the least amount of effort and the most amount of reward for him on his highest values. But it doesn't take into account that people will endure both pain and pleasure on their pursuit of their mission. And so I, in my values, am much more prepared to face different obstacles in the pursuit of what's most important to me. It might not be what's most important to him, and that's why he would give up. So that sounds like a lot of work. But to me, it didn't sound like a lot of work. I was more just like seeking, okay, how can I start to do more? How can I do what I love, as opposed to completely changing and shifting? And I was actually working with my coach, and she was like, stop seeking these answers from the outside and just look on the inside. And she started to ask some really good questions to myself. What am I truly trying to seek? When have I been at my best? Simple little questions, seemingly simple little questions like this. And again, challenging my existing paradigms by asking questions such as, is it true? How do you know for sure? Like little questions like this. And even like the tiniest little, the hint of doubt is like, Like I remember one instance, and I was like, I really wanted to sign this client because I could see that I could really help him. And I was speaking to my coach later that night, and I said like, how come, it just sucks. And she's like, well, she asked me, why didn't you want to sign that client? And I said, no, like I did. And she goes, no, why didn't you want to sign that client? I'm like, yeah, I guess no, he didn't really want to do the work, and he wasn't really valuing it. And as soon as I brought up the price, it just wasn't like within his budget. And then she's like, is that the kind of client you want? I'm like, no, like I like the clients who are happy to pay a premium price, who are happy to do the work, who, are ready to throw themselves in and value what I've got. And I was like, and she was like, well, could that have been a reality? And I'm like, not in this case, not right now. Like it's not the right time. And just little questions like that, like, why didn't I want to sign the client? Like I wouldn't have thought to ask myself that, but it was so valuable because like, and it just like destroyed I did want to have them as a client. And then it's like, maybe I didn't. And yeah, really just asking myself those difficult questions has been awesome.
Yeah, well, and she sounds fantastic in terms of like an intuitive coach. And the funny thing is, it's not funny, but in terms of you then pick up those traits in your coaching. So when you work on yourself, then when you work with your clients, you can start to, I guess, the skills that you're uncovering. You're like, oh, holy shit, you can,
and that's why I do it.
Yeah. It's
so
just
because I know the deeper I go with myself, the more available and the more assistance and the more problems I can solve for other people. And that's my purpose, being able to help people solve the bullshit that they're, and the stories and the issues they're going through in business, in life, in their relationships, in, who they think they are in the world. It's invaluable. And the only reason is, and it's just because I'm willing to step into and walk around that side of my house to be like, okay, like show me where I need to start doing some improvements, because I don't want to live that way anymore. And some people aren't ready to walk around the side of their house, and some people go their whole lives like that, which is, that's up to them. But I just think for a congruent life, if you can walk around the side of the house or peer over that wall and then you decide to go back, like, I just don't think I could live that way. It just wouldn't feel right.
But I think the beauty of that is no matter how experienced you get, how good you get, there's always going to be the side of the house that needs work.
So true. Yeah.
And it's the more...
It's like you go around and the other side is just like broken again.
And that's what... and I think a while ago you might have interviewed Paul Check, but I heard Paul Check talking on Aubrey Marcus's podcast, and he was talking about, darkness and, quote unquote, like evil. And he's saying, having those darkness, having that depression, having that downside, the times that are tough is essentially what you need to give you that contrast, because, life's about contrast. It's not like you can say, oh, my house is perfect, there's always going to be, 4 walls, it's going to be perfect, and there's never going to be any issues. But having that contrast and you finding that contrast gives you the upside as well.
100%.
Yeah. So with so just moving gears a little bit. So you've changed a little bit. I guess you've rebranded your podcast, or launched a new podcast since last time we spoke. I think you were still doing the PT Profit. Now you've got Deliberate Life. Could you just talk us through what transpired, why you changed? What is it, a different demographic, and the refocus with that?
Yeah, I like to see people explore different areas of their life. And I don't believe in the myth of, only doing one thing. And yes, I believe in focus, but I also believe in inspiring and helping as many people as possible. And I think there's specialists and there's generalists. And I think a lot of people who have learnt one way are very much in the camp of bullying, or saying like you can't be successful unless you do this one thing. And I've just found in my own life, like, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, I've had a lot of success. I've written a book, I've spoken on stage, I have different podcasts, interviewed different people, dined with different people, been interviewed on podcasts, had different jobs. Like, there's in different industries, whether that's IT or whether that's be in fitness or whether that be in personal development, whether that be in like masculinity and men's health. Like, there's just so many different things. And I think what it's really about is just having an attitude of service. And so the Deliberate Life is exactly that, like deciding and living deliberately on what you want to do, and, exploring different people, exploring different ways of living, and getting a holistic 360-degree objective view of the world, because that's where you can make the best decisions from. If you've only got one view, then you can if you've only got one way of doing things, you're what I would call like a one-trick pony, and that's great. But if you deter off that, and if you go off the plan and you don't want to follow that particular path, then you won't be successwhat. But I despise that guru model. I despise the whole, like, if you don't do it my way, then it's the highway. And the reason why a lot of people do that is because that's what either they've been taught and they're now just regurgitating it, or that's what's worked for them and they're not really aware of other systems, or maybe they are, but that's the most efficient. Like I'm cool with that. But for me, what inspires me most is helping people with a variety of issues and that might mean less people in the short run, but greater impact with the people that I do serve that are attracted to me. So the people who come to me have tried, I only do one thing. Like I'm an expert specialist in this one particular thing. And they're like, you know what? It gave me a good skill set, but I needed more. Like I need more well-rounded. Like I need something custom. I need like a custom blueprint for how to do it. Like you see like the kit homes, which is just like, this is the home you can choose, 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. Here's where it is. Like this is the exact blueprint of what you can have. Or you can be like, you know what? Like I want to try something different. I want to have a completely unique design. I want to have, 3.5 bedrooms, and I want to have a hybrid area in my house. I want to have a pool in the backyard. And I found that, when you can mix it up and pursue things that provide value, number one, and provide fulfillment, then when you can marry those two things up and have fulfillment and provide value, then you can have a great life. And that is my mission, is to have a great life and allow other people to have a great life around me. And intertwined with living a great life is living a deliberate life, which is where you're choosing every day to be great.
Yeah, well, that's a good answer. And I think when you spoke about before, you have the people that are, practitioner, they just do one thing one way. And I think a lot of times, especially with social media and branding, if you're somewhat controversial and polarizing in your views, and you say you despise all vegans, or you hate all people who follow a ketogenic diet, or if you put yourself in one camp, they get sort of thrust up into that industry or whatever area that they're focusing on, and then they've I think a lot of times people do that strategically, but it's not necessarily the most open-minded way to live.
I've just found, man, a lot of the people, it's cyclical, but you find a lot of the people who have lived that way, eventually they come back around, and they go, and I won't name names, but there's a very popular internet marketing mastermind and guru, and he was like the king of internet marketing, and he was like 3 years into it. He's like, I hate my business. Like I can't, I did all the scammy tricks, I did all the tactics, I did all the things, and then after 3.5 years, like I couldn't even look my customers in the eye because I just knew I wasn't living congruently. Like that's I would much rather, if I see repeated data from all different people who report the same story of, I wasn't living congruently, it wasn't the business I wanted, I didn't end up enjoying myself, and here's what I did instead. I would much rather just bypass the part where you don't love your business and don't love what you're doing, and find out what you do love doing and create a path as opposed to follow someone else's, and just do more of that. And if that means it sucks along the way at times, then that means it sucks along the way at times. But they're just barriers. They're barriers to entry to show you how bad you want it. And at some point, you're going to make an objective decision and be like, fuck, like maybe this isn't for me. And that just takes wisdom and experience. And other times you'll get through the shit. You'll get through the mud. But, it'll be unrealistic to think that that's never going to happen. But I'd much prefer to follow, if anyone's listening and is a little bit confused about what they should do perhaps, or whether they should just follow one thing or do a bunch, like give something a try. Just start to make some moves in a specific direction, and things will start to become clearer. But the worst thing you can do, and the most unproductive thing, is just staying stuck, because then you don't get anywhere, and that's just not really productive if your goal is to do something great.
Yeah, so just digging a little bit deeper into, I know you're an experienced, I guess, online marketer. I'd call you almost just from like, there's obviously I don't want to say the guru tag, but you're someone who's been online for a while. You've been doing a podcast for since 2013 or whatever it was, and you've been posting. You're a consistent contributor online. What for you now in 2019? What return on investment for your time spent? What platforms? And this is probably a little bit more specific, but is it podcasts you focus on? Where do you get the biggest bang for your buck in return for your business, but also just for engagements as well?
Yeah. For me, and again, like you said, like I'm definitely, I have been online, but I'm definitely not any sort of guru. This is certainly much more people that are like traffic dudes that are just like, you know, they know traffic inside out. I know for me that when I'm just authentic and I share both on Facebook with stories and Instagram, that I attract the right type of people. And so for me, yeah, Instagram and sort of longer form content. I've tried I wouldn't even say all. I've tried some of the different tactics around, you know, post at this time and only post these types of images and do this, use these quotes and, you know, all that, like what everyone else is doing. But if everyone else is doing it, I just found it just looks exactly the same as everyone else's. And so for me, I've found, less podcast for me personally, 2019. More just being real, more just sharing authentically my journey. And you know what? Like, counterintuitively, again, like thinking that being vulnerable, like there's a point, right? I don't just want anyone to just think, oh, you just go out there and just use what I call vulnerable marketing, which I think some people try and exploit and just like think they can just spew their emotions and feelings all over the computer keyboard and out will pop clients. Like there's a certain point where you're like, whoa, dude, just relax a little bit. But understanding different parts of yourself that you can be vulnerable about, you know, not being too sensitive, but not being like too overly bearing and just like dropping, like, you know, you see certain people and you're like, dude, you're just a victim. Like you're just using that. Like, I don't know, for me anyway, I can see through it. I'm like, you know what? You're just using that to try and conjure up. And that's cool because that's, leverage it 100%. That's cool. That's social media. It's being able to polarize people to get them to take a specific action and get them pissed off with you, and or to get raving fans and all that kind of stuff. And that's awesome for people who want to market themselves that way and grow a really rabid following. But like I said, like everyone I know that's followed that particular way ends up wanting to come back to the other side. So I guess there's definitely advantages and disadvantages to both. For me, it's been like the realer I get and, you know, just sharing stuff that's important to me. I mean, that's why social media was created. Like you can use it, definitely, like using it strategically. And if you're using it for business, then definitely. But I found like the more real you are, the more people that are also real, like you attract. Like I'm just so honest and authentic to as much as I can in my belief system, that the right people read it and like, man, like that content really connected with me. And I'm like, well, that's great. Like you can either ingest it, do something with it. Like, great. I'm happy to be providing and sharing part of my journey. I write things because they mean something to me, as opposed to, oh, I can't wait to get clients from this post. If they do and someone really resonates with it and they want help with it, then great. That's awesome. I'm here to help. But I guess I wouldn't be like every single post, you know, strategically thinking about, oh, how am I going to polarize someone in this particular post? That might work for some people. And maybe I'm doing it a slower way, but I've just found like to build an authentic business where I get people that I actually really enjoy working with and get to do what I love every single day, where I'm not, you know, attracting psychopaths, or I'm not attracting people who have wacky beliefs that I might have stated just to try and get a client. I'm just get people that enjoy what I believe, which is, you know, when you can cross over what you believe with what someone else believes, and you find a match there, then that's like your niche. All this like work and talk around niche, like find someone's highest value, find your highest value, and when those two collide, then that creates a niche, a little pocket of the world that you can occupy. So yeah, to summarize, yeah, I just try and be as real and open as possible, and the right people are attracted to that, and specific mediums right now that are working. I mean, you know, depending on when someone listens to this, it could be completely different. But if someone's listening in 2019, like, just ask yourself, you know, don't just do it because I do it, but do it. You know, if you're good on video, then maybe a YouTube channel is the way to go. If you want to connect with amazing people, then maybe a podcast is the way to go. If you like to share through the written word, then just use your social media and do writing. And the second thing I'd say, Adam, and this is really important as well, is there is a strategic element to it. So I make stuff, and then I move into like the strategic, like business side of things. And in that realm, I do believe it's important to understand persuasive copy and writing. And has been a big shift for me as well, because I just thought, I'm a great writer, and I am a great writer, but with the purpose of what I do my writing for is to help make people feel and be great and to stand up. And that's awesome. But if I'm doing it for the purpose of gaining clients and helping someone in their business, it requires a different skill set. And so there's a difference between writing and copywriting. And copywriting is a specific advertising language. And so really understanding how funnels, or how a sales funnel can be influenced with specific words, and helping people move through a funnel using persuasive language. And really, I've got my bookshelf behind here, and it's got, books by the masters of advertising copy that, the earliest book is like probably 85, all the way back down to like 1919. Like there's a huge spectrum there, and most of them, like the average would be like 1950, 1940. So learning the organic side of things, I do because I share and it's expression, and if the right people are attracted to me, then great. But then there's the strategic part, which is the advertising copy, which is based upon my marketing and my advertising and my paid methods and sales funnels, which is like a separate arm. And you know what? When different worlds collide, and I say, look, if someone wants to come to me and they want help with their business, I'm like, awesome, jump into it here, check it out, see what you think. If you like it, apply. We can work together. And vice versa. If someone's just reading my organic post and like, you know what, really got a lot of value from that, thank you, then that's great as well. I'm much more of a person. I'm more of a if someone comes to me and I'd much prefer to build a business where people come to me and ask for my help for a specific problem or something they're going through, or a challenge, as opposed to saying like, you're broken, I can fix you, do this 5-step system. And I can certainly see like a need in life, or I can see an area for both in life. I just much prefer the people who are willing to do the work. And the people who are willing to do the work are the people who seek out and are seeking out, hey, you know what, I'm not wanting my life to be this way, I'm ready to change things.
Yeah.
So that's the approach. So a bit of both, but one's expression and one's business.
And who would you say they're guys online now that you look up to, in terms of, you might not necessarily work with them as coaches, but as their content as a consumer, whether you're consuming their Instagram or their YouTube or their podcasts, who are the guys that you sort of regularly go to online for learning or just, I guess, self-development in some areas?
I'm so skewed now, man, because a lot of online advertising and marketing and content delivery is much more directed towards that, like basically like in internet marketing, there's sell the sizzle but not the steak, and so there's a lot of like cloaking, there's a lot of like smoke and mirrors, and a lot of like if you do this then you get that, but there's no actual help that's given, and so there's probably, if I look at one of my mentors, Dr. John Demartini, he is very much like, he's a teacher. Like he's definitely not a marketer, and he's not a huge business head and stuff like that. He's got people that handle that for him, but his goal is to help teach people, and he's got more than enough money now to be financially independent, and he wants to spread his message, but his goal is to teach people. And then I know other people who are online, and their goal is to get you into their program. And there's definitely like horses for courses, and there's different times for different places. I much prefer to follow someone with who has the same end point as me, and that is, at this point in time, John, he wants to share and teach and help people grow. But someone else to give specifics, I like following there's a guy called Garrett J. I think that he's quite an aggressive and smart marketer. I like his stuff. But as far as like new age people, like the books I was mentioning before, like it's crazy, but they're almost the exact same thing. Like it just happens to be the mediums change. They'll talk about, let's say like a direct response copywriter back in the day. They'll talk about how they have they put an ad up, and then they ask for you to return the coupon. And then once you return the coupon, then you go into like they try and get you into recurring a recurring revenue, or they get you to buy the entire book or the entire product.
Mm-hmm.
That's the exact same as what we're doing online. Like you see an ad, then you reply to the ad. So instead of sending a coupon in, you send your email address. Then you go to the next stage where they say, okay, here's the catalog, here's what you can buy. Just like you get sent to a landing page after you put your email address in. And then it says then once you buy something, the product is delivered or the book is delivered or whatever program it is. And online, it's the same sort of thing. So we're living in the same parallels. And so I think that if you were to only look at what's happening right now, then you're always dependent on the latest guru and the latest hack and the latest change and what's the Facebook algorithm doing. Like I know Facebook guys that, or like people that are just ManyChat or whatever the chat bots, like they're just chatbot guys. I just don't see that as a very productive long-term business model because that's going to change. Even now, like not that many people are using chatbots. Who wants to talk to a chatbot? People want to talk to people.
It's true.
Then you've got people who are like, they're like just Facebook ads guys, and that's probably like a step above. But even then, like if you distill it back and work it back, like I always just want to find the principles of an industry, and the principles aren't. If you're only looking, you want to find people who've been doing it for years, or systems have been around for decades, like learning from guys like Eugene Schwartz or Claude Hopkins or Rossa Reeves or my personal favorite, John Caples. Like guys like these have just been around for yonks and years, and their books are still like highly sought after. There's value in that. And so some of the mentors that I follow now is not so much guys doing it online. I mean, there's probably hundreds of guys that are just like slaying it and they're awesome online. I've found like the information they're sharing, having done research on both, is stuff from the old school anyway. So I'd much rather master the principles of human communication, human behavior, persuasion, influence, and all that stuff that now is called internet marketing. But in reality, like this stuff's been around for 100+ years.
Yeah,
it's just about being resourceful enough to find it.
The new guys, they're just applying it to whichever medium it is, whether it's a podcast or Instagram or YouTube or a book or etc. They're just rehashing it with the new
from the masters.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So with I guess advice for, and last time we spoke about because we have a lot of coaches that would listen to this podcast and business owners as well. But what advice? Last time you gave a bit of advice around stepping out of that model, trading time for money in terms of creating products and other things. But I guess with what we've just recently been talking about in 2019, where the ball or the puck's heading, what I guess advice would you give your clients and for listeners? What's where should they be focused and to taking the next step into their learning or development as well?
I would say the best thing they can do is find out what their personal values are, because that's always going to be, not always because they do change, but for right now, most people have like a consistent value that's been with them for their entire lives. Unless like a cataclysmic traumatic event happens, most people have a consistent theme that runs through their life, whether that be like a lot of people that I attract, the consistent theme in their life is personal growth and achievement and success, which funnily enough is what I'm about. Then, so I would say find out what your values are, because that's going to be a really good dictator of things that inspire you, things that you want to spend money on, things that you would like to spend time on, things that you can see a payoff for. And that just gives you a really good central pillar, almost like a lighthouse, just to guide you of like where you should be going, what you should be focused on. If something doesn't feel right, it's probably because you're off track with what that highest value is. And I found that's the most productive method of achieving what you most want to achieve. And if you're a coach, it's certainly valuable to have the power within to not only draw out what's important to you as an individual, but then to have the power to then draw out what's important to other people as individuals. So once you find out your values, like that becomes, now they can become a tool in your tool belt to find out what's important and what are other people's values. Because once they have that, then they can create their personal blueprint of what's important to them. And then if they choose, they can share it with their family members or their work colleagues or whoever, or just have the internal knowledge. Yeah. And so in 2019, my biggest advice is find out what those values are, because it's going to give you a fingerprint unique 1000% custom to you blueprint into what inspires you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good advice. What so just talking about your own coaching now and your business specific, who are the types of people that you are wanting to work with and that you do work with, and perhaps just any like case studies or stories about people that you have worked with and their results?
Yes, the best people, anyone listening, the best person is someone who is like, you know what, like I'm ready to do something about this now. I find for me, they're the most fun people to work with. The most fun people are people who think they're like effed up the most, like they think they're screwed up the most, which I've certainly been there. And I thought like, I'm unfixable. But I can tell you, like, it's not the case. And a lot of the people that I really enjoy helping and they get a lot of value are people who no longer want to live that way. They don't want to live with, or in terms of, I'm not good enough, I'm not enough, I want more, but I don't know why. Self blame, blaming others, self doubt, like anything like the mixture of my mind is pretty screwed up and I can't seem to control it, mixing in with it's hurting my business results. Like if you cross over there, like let's get to work. But most importantly, the only criteria that would really exist is someone's ready and willing to do something about it. Like if you're not, then no one can help you. Like the person who gets the best results is the person who's like, I'm ready to go. Like I'm willing to pay the price of what it costs, not just monetary, but more so like I'm willing to crush my limiting beliefs. I'm willing to go and explore and allow someone to enter into my mind, ask certain questions and destroy what I previously thought was truth, which is like super scary. But once you see it, like with the whole theme of the podcast is like, once you see it, you can't not do it. You can't not go there. And like, specific results that I've personally seen from people who are willing to do that. I mean, we've taken a guy he came to me earning about 2K a week. We're about to hit 5K. And that was, I don't like to give time frames because it gives an unrealistic expectation. So anyone listening, no promise of the same, but we did that in about 16 or 15 weeks now. Another client that I've worked with over 3 years, we're able to take them from 70,000 a year to 330. And that's the thing, like I said, transformation takes time. And so, it's about working with people who align, and I just always believe like the right people are aligned to the right coach. And if you value someone who's authentic, then hey, get in touch with Adam, get in touch with myself. Like, let's have a chat. Like, I'm not into the whole like, go through my funnel and you'll talk to me or someone on my team. Like, I don't have like salespeople that are just like gonna hound you for dollars and stuff. Like, just for me, it's just not really fulfilling. Like, if you want to change, then cool, send me a message. But if you don't bother.
Well, if you're using those,
not ready yet.
If you're using those trick tactics to get you people, across the line for a sale, then you're going to have issues when you're asking them to do something that's hard. They're like, I don't want to actually do that.
Oh yeah, that's exactly right, man. That's a pain in the ass.
Yeah. So, what's been the follow up from the book? Now your book's been out for a while. How's that been received in terms of now? But in terms of like, are you thinking of doing another book, or is that one's enough for you?
No. I've definitely got big plans to I just love writing. I love the written word. There's a guy called OG Mandino, and he wrote. There's a book called The Greatest Salesman in the World, which is his most popular book. I haven't read that. That wasn't the one I read first, but he's got about 8. I think he's got about 19 different books. But I definitely have plans. I want to write a lot more. And so I've got a couple that are like percolating at the moment. The book went really well. Like, I was so happy with how it was received. And just people requesting it, and just really more so connecting with the message in it and going like they really enjoyed the book, which is great. That's the purpose for me. I didn't write it to try and get it wasn't a disguised sales funnel. Like, it's a book that people can read, draw hope from, and live great, find out what's great for them, and then start moving towards that. Like that was the purpose, and that's what's out there achieving. And I just think for it to be out there in different homes around the world, which is just incredible. Like I was looking today, it's just the tools we have now is just incredible. Like I used CreateSpace, which is now an Amazon company, but I used CreateSpace to distribute it. And, I was looking on Dimmix, or I think it was the Dimmix website or some large website, and it came up. Like it came up on, so I can sell it around the world through Dimmix. I can sell it through Amazon. I can sell it through Booktopia. Like these tools that we have available to us is just incredible. And so, it just, for me, I mean, it's a creative expression, and I like that people can read. I've always been a bookworm. I've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books. And I just, woke up one day and thought, I'm reading all these other people's books. Surely someone's interested in reading my thoughts. I don't know. Let's see how it goes. And I just think it's amazing that the written word is just so versatile. Like, think about it. There's 26 letters in the English language, and yet we can formulate them and craft them and put different ones in different sequences to elicit emotion in a certain way. It's like the ultimate puzzle and the ultimate toolkit. There's 26 tools in our tool belt, and depending on how we put them together, you can elicit completely different responses. You can have hate, you can have love, you can ask questions, you can make statements, you can be angry, or you can be sad, or you can be happy, or you can just using these 26 letters. I just love it. I think it's just so interesting. And so the more and for me, it just fills me up. It makes me feel really fulfilled that I can put these 26 letters together in specific ways and help inspire someone to maybe not give up, or maybe give them hope, or maybe stop them doubting themselves so much, or allow them to take responsibility for their life, or to sort out their finances or their business or their health life or whatever it might be, and to do that with completely I don't even have to be there. And this isn't a scalability thing, but at the same time, it kind of is. I can talk to you, I can be in your house right now, Adam, in book form, and I can also be in, someone down the road, and I can also be in Indonesia, and then USA, and then New Zealand, and then Tasmania. And so for me, to be able to share that is, I think it's a real privilege that people could be interested in what I have to say after, I've ingested hundreds of other books. I thought, that's kind of cool that people want to read what I've got to say as well.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of a book as well is it's kind of, it depends on the content you're talking about, but it's somewhat evergreen. You can have it sitting on the shelf for 10, 15 years, and then you can have an impact.
That's what I love.
It's like a flow-on effect that, they could read this and then it leads them to do something else. So you never actually know the true impact of what it is that you've created, and 10, 15 years later, someone else might read it that you've never met before. So it's cool to think about that sort of stuff.
It's crazy because just super quickly on that one, because I have books on the bookshelf, and all of a sudden people are like, I'll pick up a book that have been there. It might have been there for a year, and I'll pick it up and be like, wow, it blows my mind. And it's like, wow, that was sitting dormant, not just for how long I had it, because I might have had it for a year, but even I say it's published in 1935 or 1980 or whatever. It's like, wow, this has just been lying dormant, this great information. So you're exactly right. At different points, it's going to capture someone else, and that's what's exciting. It's immortal. It's when the student is ready, the teacher or the coach or the leader appears, the mentor appears. Just like when the person's ready to read a certain book, the right book appears. I've always found that to be true in my life as well, which is cool.
And then another thing that one of my mentors once say to me is your books will lead a trail. So you'll read one and it'll lead to your next one. So that was the biggest thing with me is you start on a certain topic, and then all of a sudden, 6 years later, you've found this web of all these books that you've been reading, and hopefully they're somewhat different, because you can learn different things from reading different genres. But with the first, I think with the way we connected was through your fitness business summit. I think that was in 2016, I think it was. Any plans? So I haven't seen on social media. Are you still running those, or is that something you've gone away with? Or with the fitness business?
No, I ran in 2016 when we met. 2017 I ran it again. 2018 took it off, and then 2019 just gone. We ran another one.
Okay.
But my philosophy in life is you keep doing something until it no longer serves you. And I just found, you know what, it was good, and I really enjoyed it. But for now, I can't foresee running future ones. And the reason I say that is because the information is so readily accessible now, and there's just way more effective ways that people are reaching people, whether that be through webinars, whether that be through in person, like, you know, speaking to anyone, like trying to get bums on seats. Like if anyone listening to this is like a master of getting bums on seats, and I've been relatively successful, but as the years go by, I think that anyone will tell you like it's gotten harder and harder. And so I think there's just more effective and more efficient ways to be able to help someone learn the information. I mean, the advantage is you get to go to a room, you get to learn certain stuff, you get to meet different people, but you can do that in a variety of other ways. With less it's just real difficult. I found from my experience, more difficult now than ever than to try and get people into a room. And it's not even the money. Like I've never had free events. My events have always been priced at a good price point. Like I make profit off every single time I run an event. Like it's for profit. But even then, like it's just running free events would just be even more of a pain in the ass, because then you got to run programs, you got to have, upsells, and then it just gives a bad, like sometimes can leave a bad taste in people's mouths. And, I just found like there's more efficient ways to reach people now than the events game, but never say never. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I
love events.
I did really enjoy attending that, and I picked up some great things, and it's good to see those people that you had share the information. I still sort of follow some of those guys online. They're movers and shakers, and obviously guys that are developing themselves. So it's just getting in contact with those sorts of people, and like yourself as well. It's that's what I really liked, was just the connection of being in a room with those people. And I mean, maybe for the younger generations, it's not something that's going to be happening in the future, but I don't know. But anyway, it was a good experience from my side of things. So
awesome, man.
What are plans for next year? Just sort of rounding out the interview. So what do you got on for the next 12 months, 2020?
Yeah, so I want just a continuation of just doing what's already working. So working with a very select group of clients at the moment, and man, it's just head down, bum up, like actually creating transformation. I think less talk, less flashy, less celebrity, and more just like doing the work that counts. And I found like just by even having that attitude and just by doing that, like, the business has basically since we would have spoken, like doubled, and then almost 50% on top of that again. So like just living that way is what's working. Like when I was trying to, I've done both. I've done like a push, and I've done a, just chilled and step back, and sort of the right people will come to me. I've found that it's a combination of both. And so at the moment, moving towards into the future, it is private mentoring clients, and a couple of ideas around which, nothing set in stone or that I would mention on the podcast, but a couple of ideas around some like highly immersive events, but nothing like hundreds of people or 120 people like you would have experienced in 2016. A lot more intimate, a lot more life-changing type stuff. And all based around that personal development, business development, authenticity, self-help, if you can label it that, and more so just personal growth. Putting people, basically I should call it like the do the work event, where people want to come and do the work and change themselves, because that's really what I'm about, and helping people, what I call get it. Like I don't want to just share information for the sake of it. Like if anyone's listening to this, like only listen with the purpose of getting it. What are you getting out of this? Ask yourself, what are the 3 things I've learned from Adam and Hayden today? What am I going to do with this from this very point in time? What's the actions I'm going to take within the next 48 hours? What am I committed to? How can I stay accountable, etc.? Like, if you can get it, then that's, I consider it time well spent, whatever activity I'm doing.
Yeah, awesome. So I guess we're ending or coming to the end of the interview now. So do you have any parting words or dad jokes or funny stories you want to leave us with?
Well, at the moment, I'm only a dad to a dog, so unfortunately, my dad joke repertoire is quite minimal. But my biggest piece of advice is start taking action before you feel completely ready. And because, so many people, there's no shining sign. There's no like heavens opening up saying like you are now ready. Like, you have to allow yourself or give yourself that permission to be like, now is the right time to start. And I can guarantee you, like, if someone else is doing it, that's awesome, because that just shows you that you can do it too. And you may need to change it and craft it and make it yours. And that's what I'd recommend. But if someone's doing something, that's amazing. If they're making money from it, even better, because there's a proof of concept there. Now you just have to go out there and actually do it your way. So my biggest piece of advice, follow your values, find out how to craft that into a commercially viable message, so you can make money from it if that's what you choose to do. And if you don't want to, that's completely cool as well. But if you want to build a business around what you love, the first step is find your values, then find out how you can make that commercially viable. And then step 3 is just go for it, do the work, and be willing to embrace the inevitable challenge and support that comes along with it.
Yeah, awesome. Great advice. Now, finally, where can people get in contact with you, and if they want coaching or just to follow and see what you're about? Where would you direct people to go find you out?
If you just go to haydenwilson.com.au, it's HAYDENWILSON.com.au, they can see all the stuff there. They can connect with me on social media. I'm pretty they should be able to find my stuff pretty easy. Got a lot of blog content and social media, etc. But yeah, head to the website and you'll be able to find out about who I am. And if I suit you, then awesome. Look forward to speaking.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time today. It's been great as always.
You're welcome,
to catch up.
Yeah.
And we'll have to catch up in person when I'm back, hopefully maybe later this year.
Yeah, just let me know. Yep. Just give me the word, man.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again, Hayden.
All right, thanks, brother.